So a warm welcome. It is a great delight to see so many familiar and also unfamiliar faces tuning in. So many people, different people from all over the world who are joining us today. My name is Katharina Stechl. I am the program manager of the Roundtable Human Rights and Tourism, and I am delighted to be your host for today's session. I would also like to introduce my dear colleague Yara Schreiber. We are conducting this series of webinars together, and she will be responsible in the background for a smooth technical process. Today, we talk about choices for human rights, how tourism businesses can sensitize and influence their travelers. But before we dive right into the topic, let me spare a moment to talk about the housekeeping rules of today's webinar and also to introduce the roundtable for those of you who are joining us for the first time. So this webinar will be recorded, as you might see, and it will also afterwards be published on the Roundtable website and on our YouTube channel. As always, we have two fantastic speakers on board, and after each input, we will have little time for questions. If you have any questions, please use the chat function, and we will try to cover as many of that as possible. So, the Roundtable Human Rights in Tourism is a multi-stakeholder initiative. We were founded in 2012 as a nonprofit association under German law. We currently have 33 members that you see here on that slide, 5 interest groups. So that's tour operators, travel associations, multipliers such as institutions, universities, foundations, then civil society certifiers, and of course tour operators. Our membership is open to all tourism businesses that commit themselves to the Roundtable principles and also sign the voluntary commitment. If you're interested in a membership, please don't hesitate to contact us. We always warmly welcome new members, and we really see us as an open dialogue platform for the exchange of knowledge, for mutual learning within the industry. And we provide a lot of guidance materials, resources on our website. So if you have not done that yet, check out the website, and you hopefully find a lot of useful resources there. One more thing on our own behalf. As you might know, the Roundtable's work is based on the UN Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and an important element of these UN Guiding Principles and also upcoming supply chain legislations is that people or communities must be able to report when their rights have been harmed or violated. And this is called the Grievance Mechanisms. Some of you might already be familiar with that term. And we are at the moment actually conducting a project on grievance mechanisms in tourism, and therefore we would need your support. So if you are a tour operator, we would highly appreciate your support. And if you would take part in the survey, we will post the link now in the chat. It's a very short survey, it might take you less than 10 minutes, and it also can be filled out anonymously. And that really helps us in order to find the needs of the tourism industry in regard for this grievance mechanism. So I already said we have constantly projects going on, and we also do a lot of events. So if not done already, also make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. I promise you there will be no spam. It's just invitations to a lot of our events. So for example, we have our annual symposium coming up. That will be about the link between climate protection and human rights. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, you will also receive all information about that. And we would also be grateful if you evaluate today's event, because that always helps us a lot to work in a very demand-oriented way. So we also posted that link to that very short and also anonymous feedback survey. But enough about us. We want to talk about, and especially also with our speakers. So the main objective of this webinar is for tour operators to understand how they can better market socially sustainable projects and products and communicate, and also raise awareness of human rights and socially responsible travel among customers, and that before, during, and after their travels. And therefore, we have two high-class speakers with us, and I'm thrilled to welcome Milena and Matteo on our virtual stage. Milena is an expert in human behavior and travel, and she's using knowledge about human psychology to design solutions to make tourism more sustainable and more profitable. She also is the founder of a boutique consultancy supporting business and destinations, which is called BehaviorSMART, and applying BehaviorSMART innovations. And then we have Matteo with us, a responsible tourism expert, social entrepreneur, and founder of the Y Steps Travel Group. That consists of the Y Steps Foundation, the Y Steps Consulting, and the Y Steps Travel. He has so many different certifications and courses that he even participated in that I cannot even name them all, but I'm sure he's going to tell you more about it in his presentation. And with that very brief introduction, enough from my side, and I would directly hand over to Milena. I'm sincerely looking forward to your input, and welcome.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be here with you today. I am going to share my screen and dive right into that. I also want to recognize that I'm super pleased to see so many familiar faces. Okay, my screen is visible and it's moving, right? Just making sure. Okay, so as you heard in my introduction, my background is in using knowledge about how people think, make decisions, and reach their actions in order to understand better specific situations and challenges in the travel situation, and then respectively design solutions or work with companies and destinations to design solutions that are people smart and account for the realistic way in which people decide and act. So you already received a little bit of information about me, so I'm not going to waste much time on that. What I'll talk about is start with providing a little bit of context if this is the first time that you are exposed to the term BehaviorSMART. So I'll give you a little bit of background on what is BehaviorSMART and what is the knowledge field and the science that inspires that. We'll talk a little bit about traveler psychology and why it's important to be realistic about how people make decisions, especially when they're on holiday. Then we will focus on the practicalities of taking a BehaviorSMART approach, specifically when it comes to accounting for responsible sustainability principles and specifically human rights in tourism. So I'm not going to spend much time on my profile. Enough was said, and if you're interested, I'm more than happy to share more after that. So let's focus on what is BehaviorSMART thinking. So BehaviorSMART means being realistic about how people really think, how they reach the decisions that they reach, and how they decide how to act in a particular situation. And the reason that we want to be realistic about that is that that has a lot of implications, both about how successful we are as a business, but also how effective we are specifically with sustainability and making sure that we adhere to the principles of responsible tourism. In essence, we approach BehaviorSMART, or BehaviorSMART is inspired by the constantly accumulating and expanding knowledge in behavioral sciences in ways that helps us eliminate the conflict between what people really think and how they act and what we think they will do in a particular situation. So just a little bit of background. BehaviorSMART is inspired by a scientific field called behavioral economics. Some of you may have been exposed to knowledge in that space because it's widely used in policy making, in areas such as healthcare, consumer protection, financial services, and so on and so forth. So the big contribution of behavioral economics is that it actually brought human realism into the understanding of how we make decisions. In the past, the more classical pre-behavioral economics assumed that people across all contexts are 100% rational. Whenever they're faced with a decision, they go, they find the necessary information, they estimate the pros and cons attached to each option, and then they go with the optimal choice that lies in front of us, with the perfect ability to predict the future, to account for uncertainties, and to calculate probabilities. In reality, psychologists, with the human realism that they brought to the social and economic space, suggested that, in fact, many of us across different contexts, including when it comes to very, very important life decisions, actually try to avoid the 100% rational decision making and the pros and cons approach of identifying the ideal option. And we very often look for some shortcuts that will get us faster to a certain decision. In many, many cases, we have the information, we ignore information, even if it's right in front of our eyes. I know that many of you can relate to that and are often shocked at how a traveler or a client can claim that they are completely unaware of something that you have sent them multiple times. So this is the mechanism that we are relating, that we are talking about. We also, behavioral scientists also know that the specific context, the specific moment in which we are acting or deciding, the people who are around us can have a profound effect on the choice that we are going to make. One and the same person can end up making very different choices depending on who's in their company, where they are, what state of mind they are, and so on. And one thing that's very important when it comes to understanding behavior towards sustainability and concepts such as human rights is that we as decision makers actually dislike and are really bad in accounting for vague and complex ideas such as climate change, such as sustainability, such as human rights. So another important contribution of behavioral economics is that it actually claims that we have two mechanisms in which we make decisions. We have a fast decision making system, and this is the part of our brain which looks to make a quick shortcut-driven decision. And this is the part and the types of decisions which are highly influenced by the people around us, but by what others are choosing, what we think others will like as a choice. We also have, of course, a slow thinking system. This is our rational brain, which kicks in when we have the conditions for that, when we have the time and the ability to dive into different information sources, to do research, to study the pros and cons. The question is, which of the two kicks in and what kind of decisions go through the fast or the slow thinking system? And we'll talk a little bit about that. So in essence, the most important contribution of behavioral realism or applying BehaviorSMART approach to understanding human decision making is to understand that decisions and actions are a product, an outcome of two groups of factors. One relates to the individual, how much they know, what is their value system, what experiences that they've already had. But then the other largely relates to the specific context, where they are, how elevated they are in the specific context, what are others doing, what are the social norms, or what they think are the norms that they need to adhere to. So with this introduction, I hope that I've set the context to talk about what does it mean to be behavior smart when we think about responsible consumption. So what does behavioral thinking or being behavior smart give us when we are looking at different challenges in the context of tourism? The first part of being behavior smart is that it allows you to better understand the challenge that you're faced with, because you can look at what are the root behaviors that lead to the problem that we are interested in solving. What are the exact actions and decisions that ultimately produce the undesired effect that we want to overcome or we want to avoid? And then based on that, we can produce solutions that are more effective and more efficient because they naturally align with the human behavior that is at the core. So we can sometimes achieve results with small tweaks, small adjustments of how information is presented, of how an itinerary is designed, because it slowly or because it slightly adjusts the behavior in a way that addresses the specific route, rather than to overhaul the entire way in which we do business or in which we present certain experiences. The reason why in sustainability and in responsible consumption, we're particularly interested in being behavior smart is because until now, most of the approaches we have taken towards sustainability have been based on incorrect assumptions about how people actually behave and make decisions about sustainability and human rights. And one of these SINs or design challenges that has come out of these incorrect assumptions is that we have placed disproportionate decision-making based on the traveler, disregarding the fact that psychologically, the traveler is the least equipped and least motivated stakeholder in the tourism ecosystem to address sustainability. And I know that's a harsh statement, but I want to give you some justification for that. So here are just a few points synthesizing what we know from traveler psychology and behavioral sciences for the context of holiday behavior. The first thing that we need to be mindful of is that traveler decisions are often driven by what is easier and what is the available shortcut, rather than a mindful choice of the different options on the table. So in situations when people are choosing between different experiences that are in front of them, the most likely mechanism that they're going to listen to or go after is what seems to be most appealing, what seems to be the choice of others, rather than which experience aligns most closely with the sustainable development goals or with the principles of human rights. So in that sense, being realistic about that is important. So default options and shortcuts are the most likely mechanisms that determine traveler decisions. The second thing too that's important when it comes to traveler behavior and holiday behavior specifically is that during holidays, travelers in general release controls. And that applies with the same force to behavior that guides everyday discipline that relates to living healthy, exercising, recycling, being a responsible member of the community. In the same way, it applies to decisions that relate to sustainability and caring about human rights. So the same way that you would probably allow yourself an extra glass of wine or an extra dessert during your holiday, simply because you're on holiday and just need to relax and enjoy yourself more. In the same way, you are likely to pass on or disregard or not pay as much attention to principles that relate to being good or being responsible. Another thing to remember is I know that all of us are keen on working on attracting and serving this segment of travelers who tend to be more educated, who tend to be more advanced in their understanding of sustainability, responsible consumption, human rights. But the reality is that this is a very small segment in the overall market. Yes, the sensitivity and understanding of sustainability issues is increasing, especially in the last couple of years. But the reality is that if we are applying human realism, we have to acknowledge that the majority of travelers still consider sustainability as something overwhelming to think about and something that is in direct conflict with being in a state of relaxation and enjoyment. So even if you keep feeding them with information about that, this might be something that they simply ignore. Remember that reference to information, to ignoring information, even if it's right in front of the eyes. And then the other thing that's really important from a human psychology point of view is our decisions in many cases are regulated by the expected impact. But during travel, our actions are disconnected from the impact because we are at the destination for a short period of time. If I am at home and I keep violating principles of being a responsible member of my community, or if I keep contributing to plastic waste or excessive use of local resources, this is going to catch up with me because this is my immediate environment and the impact is going to be attached to my behavior. But when we are traveling, the impact stays in the place and is more likely to catch up with the local community, with the local hosts, with the local business rather than the traveler. And that also influences the likelihood that people will be mindful about their action. So there's a much longer list, but I just wanted to sort of lay out some of the factors that we know from behavioral sciences that relate to human behavior, specifically in the context of holiday making. So what does all of that mean? That means that if we are to apply human realism and to be behavior smart when it comes to sustainability overall, both social aspects and environmental aspects, we need to move away from the classical awareness and education approach where we provide information and education to travelers in hope that once they have the information, they will change their behavior, they will begin choosing the more sustainable options and the more responsible options. And then as a result, we will see reduction in the undesired impacts. It has been decades of this approach, and we see that we are making very slow progress. The much smarter and human realistic way of doing this is actually to eliminate and minimize unsustainable, irresponsible options by weaving in these principles in the design. This is a result to automate sustainable traveler behavior, and this automatically will reduce undesired impacts. And some of the changes that we need to make are very small, and they do not really have the impact on how people will view the experience sustainable choices, because we've made it very easy for them or made it automatic for them. And we can explain how much they have contributed or how they have contributed to desired positive effects while also enjoying their experience. And that, in a way, will slowly build the sensitivity and culture of travelers in the long run. So next time they will be more mindful and naturally happier to proactively make desired choices. So in essence, the principle that we are proclaiming with behavior smart thinking is that the decision-making weight needs to be lifted from the traveler and taken on much more proactively by businesses and at times the destination. So what does that mean? I want to give you just a few practical illustrations of how we apply these principles when we work with companies and destinations, whether it's on issues that relate to social responsibility and human rights, or on issues that relate to environmental sustainability. The first one is to start with the why and understand the real reasons behind the decisions and actions that travelers are making. And this is really, really important because it does matter whether people are simply unaware of what is right or wrong, or they simply don't care. And in all cases, there are different design tweaks that we can apply in order to achieve the desired outcome and ensure that we are in line with the highest standards. But it also means being smart about what are the factors that we need to overcome. So when there are cases when we need to provide information, and there are three principles that we need to use when we do that. So as I mentioned, in many cases, people simply don't know. They are going into a new destination, or they might think that they're going into a place that's similar, culturally similar, and has similar social norms as at home. But in many cases, they're wrong about this. They simply don't know. So you, as a facilitator of the experience they're about to embark on, have the responsibility and can influence their behavior by providing information. What you need to be realistic about is that you need to be concise, and in some cases you need to make trade-offs. People, before they leave or during their trips, are not going to read 3 pages of educational materials. But if you give them 3 tips they need to remember, or if you keep reminding them that the 2 things they need to keep in mind are this and this, they will. So being concise and being smart about the top 3 things, about the most important things to keep in mind, is a way to ensure that they will keep it top of mind. The second thing is timing. We need to be very smart about the best moment in which we are supplying information, depending on when the decision is about to happen. So, for example, if you're asking people to bring a reusable bottle or bring a scarf for head covering, obviously, you need to mindfully remind them and ensure that they see the information before they trip. Some things need to come as information immediately before a certain experience if we are to shape the actions and the behavior of the traveler, rather than to tell them at the beginning of the trip because they'll forget. And sometimes we need to feed the information at the time of the decision, at the moment that they're choosing between A, B, C. What's important is, as I mentioned, people are resistant to negative and information that loads them with responsibility. So using positive framing, using descriptions such as this experience or this list of activities is curated and carefully selected for you, rather than, we've eliminated or we are limiting or prohibiting and so on. So these are small things which can matter. The second thing is to make choices, certain principles non-negotiable. Don't be afraid to take over the decisions, but communicate why. So in many cases, travelers are ready and expect that they will be faced with different norms and different rules. So take over the decision and present certain things as norm. So when you're walking into an experience, I'm giving obviously very simple examples, but giving people a bag where they would collect their trash, giving people a scarf, or reminding them to put it on because this is how things are done here before a certain experience, are small examples of this type of decision making, where simply you're taking over the control. Providing the tools that are going to make appropriate behavior easier, supply them with what they need. If they have forgotten to bring their scarf, make sure that you have some of that. If you need to take away something because it's appropriate to take a picture or to use a phone, don't be afraid to take it away, and just present it as the way things are done here. And you'll see how happy the majority of travelers will be to adhere to that. The important thing is to communicate. I think Matteo will give you some examples of how this can be done in a very smart way, where the message is that all you have to do is enjoy and relax. We've taken care of the principles of sustainability and responsibility so that you don't have to think about. So using that kind of communication is a brilliant way of making people aware, but also taking control away from them. And then in many cases, when we know that people are making automatic decisions and going with whatever is easiest, make it the easy choice. Flip default options. Make the most desired option the automatic option. So if people go with what is already the default, then let them go with the most desired option. So this is an approach that, I mean, the easiest example that that I can give is the towel changing in hotels. Asking the travelers to be proactive and hand their towels, we simply tell them that they don't need to do anything. By default, we're not going to change the towel. If they want the towel changed, then they need to be proactive. It can be applied to almost anything. Incentivize in cases when you know that you cannot eliminate undesired option or less desired option for whatever reasons, but you want to steer people towards what is better from a human rights perspective, from a social responsibility perspective. Give an add-on, provide a direct incentive, and you will see how many will be influenced by that. And also focus the attention on the gain. Why is this a better experience? It's the more authentic. It actually gives you a more immersive engagement with the local community and in interaction with locals and so on. So focusing the option on the benefit can have a profound effect on the likelihood that it's going to not only be selected, but actually produce high level of satisfaction. So I hope that I didn't run through this too fast, and I hope I provided you with some food for thought and set the stage for Matteo, who has some fantastic examples for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Milena. I actually really don't know what to say. I mean, my script block here is full of all of your quotes. I could listen to your presentation for hours. I think it was really like no beating around the bush. It was really spot on with a lot of very practical and hands-on ideas and recommendations. So actually, I really don't have a question at the moment. I also looked at the chat and I don't see anything there. So I would suggest for the moment that we'll switch over to Matteo for all the practical examples, and then give the participants a little time to think about other questions. And Matteo, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Milena, Katharina. Well, it's actually very nice because there's a lot of things that I could learn from Milena still, and probably things that I'm going to share are not sort of best practice examples, but it's just the way we do. I'm just going to share my screen again, which doesn't mean that we are, perfect at what we're doing. And same as Milena, I'm going to skip to introduce myself fully and mindful of being of time. Can you see my screen? Hopefully it works. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, I'm Matteo. I've been introduced already by Katharina, and I'm happy to share my LinkedIn later on if you want to catch up. I'm happy to. I'm CEO and founder of CEST Travel, and I wanted to talk a bit quickly about what we're doing in CEST Travel before jumping into the details. Second. So as previously mentioned, we are not only a tool company, we are also a consulting company in the CEST and the foundation. CEST Travel started off in 2017, and there's no legal entity as a social enterprise in Indonesia. So we formed CEST Foundation as our social extension to support local communities in developing responsible tourism products, and link them basically to our products in YSEP's Travel as well. And as the pandemic hit, we needed to innovate a bit, and we added another entity, which is YSEP's Consulting, where we mainly work with destinations on national, regional level. But for the same aim, the same vision, we use the power of responsible tourism to transform the industry and people's lives in Indonesia. We solely focus on Indonesia, but that's enough. It's a vast country. It's a large country, and for those of you who have been visiting Indonesia, know that in Indonesia, there's not only one destination. There's like so many different destinations within Indonesia that requires knowledge and access to destinations to understand what responsibility actually means. So who are we? Basically, it's myself, and I'm together with two other Indonesians founding the organizations. I'm not going to go into detail, but basically our backgrounds are all towards sustainable tourism and really community empowerment, and that's how we try to integrate it into our YSEP's group. Now let's talk a bit more about YSEP's travel itself. We are focusing on individualized, customized journeys in Indonesia. Trying to integrate interesting local projects, social projects, environmental projects, and sort of go towards the direction of educational travel. We work with student groups, but also with individual groups, company groups that want to have some kind of impact journeys. And I would call it probably educational travel, because we always want to connect sort of kind of a learning journey into our products. We've been previously working with international travelers inbound, so we are mainly focusing on inbound travelers. Pre-pandemic, mainly focusing on the European, US, and Australian market. And that's how based on the pre-pandemic situation, I sort of tried to design a bit of a customer awareness journey, and the journey points where we actually try to raise awareness, or as Milena said, by default and by design, try to eliminate irresponsible options. And we sort of, move through public awareness, direct contact, travel offer, travel info during the tour and then after the tour. And I will give you some examples that will not be best practice, but it's just how we do it. And I hope it just gives some kind of insight, so it can inspire others as well. Obviously, we have a website as normal tour operator, where we also raise awareness about responsibility and what it is. But we also send the message that it's basically, as mentioned, it should not be the burden of the traveler to take care of it, because simply they are on holiday and they don't want to take care about all the other things and being responsible when they're on holiday. It's just like that. We have to acknowledge that. But at the same time, we can use the opportunity to raise awareness about these issues, and that's what we do on the website as well, and obviously throughout our social media. So we're talking about tips how to be a responsible traveler for people that are interested, also sort of attracting into areas that are not very crowded. For instance, in Bali, the tourism sector is very accumulated in the south, so we try to sort of disperse them into other directions, destinations, by simply presenting the appeal. Yeah, obviously, as a company, as a social enterprise, and also to increase credibility, we designed our own responsible tourism policy, which is a lot to read, and probably very much for the people that want to look deeper and dig deeper into the context of responsibility. And probably, as Milena said, not everyone's traveler will be, not every standard traveler will look at this. But nevertheless, it's basically standard operational procedure for us. So we made it, we published it, and it's accessible for anyone to see. And it compiles of multiple areas that are related to human rights, where we try to empower local people in need, integrate it in our travel itineraries, but also ensure to protect them. There have been previous topics in the Human Rights and Tourism Roundtable regarding orphanage tourism. Obviously, we have that all considered in our travel design, in our tour design, and look at social issues when designing tours individually or for groups. And there are some examples. I'm not going to go through it one by one, But basically, we're trying to really raise awareness about the issues, and that's for people that want to read about it, but not for everyone, for every traveler. So that's just what's available in terms of information if someone is interested. When it comes to direct contact, meaning that we already talk to the customer, the traveler directly, that could be email, message, or whatever. As a quality service, we just want to customize based on the individual needs, but that doesn't mean that we have to, design everything completely from scratch. So we ask about preferences, and we talk about, for instance, homestays and eco-lodges, but mainly refer to the experience value or the experiential value of it. So we look at, hey, would it be interesting for you to stay with a local family just to see how they live, how real culture is lived, and at the same time it has some social impact, or very good social impacts actually, but we don't explicitly mention that. So we're approaching it rather from an experiential value. And then, as Milena said, designing that, really pre-designing or pre-selecting accommodations based on the sustainability performance and local ownership, meaning that we really understand which kind of hotels we suggest and by whom they're owned, and if there's performance in terms of sustainability is sufficient for us to actually include it. Obviously, we always make that trade-off between convenience, quality, sustainability. For us, we believe sustainability is just part of the quality and should be default, but it's not always implemented that way. If necessary and if needed, people sometimes ask me for certain experiences that that's against our policy, and then I explain, okay, so we want to do that kind of experience with animals, or we want to go visit that kind of destinations. Look, I'm sorry, I can help you, provide you a driver or you can visit other options, but we don't do this because of this, that, and reason. And in 95% of the cases, people would say, like, okay, then I don't have to do it either. That's fine. So I give them an option. I don't say no, but I say we don't do it because of that. And if they still go for it, it's somehow their decision, but mostly they go for the recommendation, which also shows our knowledge and expertise in local destination, understanding responsible tourism in the context of local experiences and hotels. And obviously, we suggest by default also positive impact experiences. Obviously, we can't visit like every day a super nice environmental project, social project, or whatever. People want to have some holiday, so I guess it's just the art of really balancing it between the excitement and of the traveler that says, okay, I really want to have holiday, I want to see something. So we balance it out. We look at the impacts that someone can have on travel, and we don't want to make the traveler feel bad when they start their holiday, because we all need tourism. We want tourism to thrive, but it should be in a responsible way. And that's our task as a tour operator, as a travel agent. We need to know about these local conditions, and then we can design tourism products, experiences accordingly. Yes, and what's also based on my experience is oftentimes people heard about a destination, say Bali or Indonesia, but they don't really know about the destination beforehand. They just want to go because friends of them went there, or family members went there, and they don't really mind actually what they do. It's mostly it's like a healthy mix between nature, some kind of culture visits. So we are very open to suggest these kind of positive impact experiences, but we don't need to frame them that way. So we can also say, look, this might be a very good experience to learn more about local culture without really stressing that it's super sustainable. An example would be how we do it in our itinerary. So we just mentioned something like a community-based tourism project. So you support that in a way, but we don't go into depth. So we talk more about what they're going to do there. What we do in our offers, so in our travel offers, obviously there's a detailed itinerary and a daily description where we sort of try to raise awareness, but in a non-educated way. And as a default, again, what we do, and that's also for the sake of transparency, is that we mention it to our clients that 10% of our profits will be automatically diverted to our social and internal social activities, meaning YSEP's foundation. As we are a social enterprise, we claim that we are a social enterprise. we also have to follow up on the promise, and we want to, because we want to support our local communities. And that's how we sort of by design already integrated 10% contribution to social development or the social support of initiatives that we are running in different islands of Indonesia. And that will support already local communities and projects as well. And what we also do is like that all the local projects that are visits, obviously those are directly supported the local communities, and we don't go in and negotiate with them. It's just for the sake of being transparent, but also it could also sort of raise some awareness across travelers that haven't maybe initially be thinking about those kind of impacts. And obviously, just to mention it, we also automatically set off all emissions caused in Indonesia automatically. That's already included in the package, so that is not an option. We just do it. Later, when they've been booking with us, they will receive travel information, which is rather extensive, and probably I will need to integrate the thoughts that Milena just shared, that it has to be very particular of what we're sharing. In general, there's a bit of a description about Bali, for instance, the destination they choose. So it's very customized to the destination in Indonesia. For instance, if they go to 2 destinations or 2 different islands that are particularly different, we would give them the information about these 2 different destinations, including mentioning that, for instance, there are some challenges like water supply and plastic waste, but there's no real call to action whatsoever. It's just for giving the information, and probably in most cases people wouldn't read it. But that's why we also provide refillable water bottles and bags as a default to our travelers, so they can reduce plastic waste, and obviously we try to choose hotels that are responsible about their water use and energy use. We do send them sort of like a travel information that say, if you want to know more about how to be a responsible traveler, then you can read these short bullet points looking at it. But if it's very necessary, or if it's, let's say, if we look at destinations, community projects, or local villages that we visit that we need to require very sensitive information, then we sort of mention that a day before, for instance, with our guide that says like, look, tomorrow we're going to visit a village that is rather, that is the majority is Muslim, and we need to make sure that we are, behaving according to their customs. So I would ask you to bring a long sleeve, for instance, or long trousers. So we are making sure that we don't have any negative impact, or that we don't raise sort of anger across the community. So if it's really necessary, it will be briefed a day before usually, so they can prepare accordingly. Everything else is additional information, but yeah, probably we need to do some research about how many people are actually reading it. Okay, during the tour, I think the key is really having tour guides, and this is in Bahasa Indonesia, but it's basically our SOP for tour guides, which we've been training and working with over long term, saying like, look, this is your responsibility. You're sort of brand ambassador. You're the ambassador for Indonesia. You have to really take care of your destination. So we hope to get all our tour guides to a point where they can actually be aware as well about these issues, especially when it comes to child safe policies. And they are our connecting point to our customers. And they will ultimately make the decisions on the ground. Obviously, we support them, but best would be that they are equipped with the knowledge and can make them decisions with the travelers together in order to avoid any negative social impacts. What we've done after the tour is, obviously, in general, we want to raise awareness about creating impact reports annually. These are a bit outdated, sorry for that. But basically, we try to be raising awareness about what kind of footprints we have in Indonesia, trying to be transparent about it and measure it, so we can also see how much of the money is diverted into, let's say, local businesses or locally owned businesses. How much do we spend on homestays and eco-lodges? What kind of environmental and social impact we had? what we wanted to do shortly before the pandemic hit, but we didn't get to do it. And this is a bold step of being transparent. Basically, after the tour, or even before the tour, informing the traveler about the impact of this tour. Stressing about the positive impacts, obviously, but also mentioning maybe not in a way that it's, you know, that they feel negative about their journey, but because of their decisions, they, you know, for instance, diverted 38% of their travel costs into local accommodation, supporting local communities. 10% of it went into environmental projects, and so forth. But that is still a bit difficult when you want to implement that on a local level. It would work, but on an international level, it's going to be a bit difficult because obviously we need to account for our margins as well, and that might be a bit too transparent for many tour operators. But generally, it's a good idea to see where does the money go actually. And I think besides having, you know, besides having certifications that can, you know, sort of certify that you're responsible as a company, this is a way to gain trust and actually see that money is well spent if travelers are interested in it. Challenges that we've been facing, that's pretty much described by Milena before, is like, do the travelers actually care or care to read? Basically, we've been seeing that most people are not, they're not likely to read all the details we send them to it. And most travelers, the default, while it's all over the place, actually, if we see it in the media, and then, you know, people want to travel sustainable, and, you know, 83%, Booking.com says 83% wants to travel more sustainable in the future, and probably COVID helped us a lot to increase that numbers. But, you know, the question is really, do they actually care, and is it their responsibility maybe also to care? Yes, they should care, but again, it's their holiday, and we can't ask them to do extensive researches on how to travel sustainable. So I totally agree with Milena when saying that that shift has to go back to the tour operator and the destination itself. That's where we have to be responsible of the tours we integrate and design for our customers. As already mentioned as well, sustainability perception is still like very much related to low quality. If I'm traveling sustainable, that I don't have convenience or what. So it's the general question of travelers connecting sustainability with low quality. So we have to do a lot of work on that to show that sustainability actually means quality in many cases. And what we've been particularly facing is just that our prices sometimes it's simply not competitive, because we have a very very strong rule with people to, you know, if you're aware about the concept, you work with DMCs, international corporations or international tour operators, and ultimately it's about volume. Once you reach the volume, you get the prices down, and that's not how we work. That's not the traditional way we work. So what we try to establish is a fair relationship between our supply chain and ourselves, and work as partners on it. But that sometimes relates or directly it translates into higher pricing, which means is, and that's one of the primary drivers of travelers to make decisions, is still pricing. So we come out sometimes not as competitive, but we're working on changing that in the future. Some last from me, some last thoughts is when we, especially when we work on an international scale, is to, in order to be able to implement responsible travel, really have to understand and know about your destinations, or work with companies that do and care about the places they work and live, because it's such responsible travel, and that of experience from one island to another island in Indonesia is very much place-based, and the solutions need to be as individual as that. And yeah, and besides that, I think sustainability for all of us should not be just like a box that we check, like on a checking list. Okay, I have to reduce my waste. I have to do it. It's really starting on mindset, on the concepts of tourism, on what we offer to clients and how we offer it, as Milena said, by design as well. So it really, it's change of mindset, and once we've been on that path, then we can offer the right solutions for travelers and work with the right companies that maintain the destinations and offer them for future travelers. I hope that was insightful. I'm sorry if something wasn't unclear, but feel free if you have any questions. I'm happy to share further. That's it from my side.
Thank you so much, Matteo. I really liked it because I kind of had the feeling like that the two presentations really mashed into each other like a gear wheel. That was very smooth. And I would maybe start with a question that was originally addressed to Milena, but I would first address it to you, Matteo. And that is like, how do you actually behave if customers, despite of how often you have told them to behave in a certain way, to dress in a certain way, for example, if they refuse to do so? That was a question from the audience, that is something that people encounter quite often, that no matter how many times you tell them that they don't. And that is probably also a strategic approach in the sense of how you actually educate your tour guides and how you brief them, right? So I would first give this to Matteo.
Yeah, hi Birgit, thanks for the question. Yes, it's a good question, and obviously it has to be taken case by case. But luckily, I've never been in that situation that we had people misbehaving to an extent where we actually have to sort of really, you know, step over the line, saying like, okay, this far and not further, because that's it. We have a responsibility to protect the area we live in. Because there's a natural selection, you know, if we book with a responsible tour operator, probably there's already some kind of awareness. So we have a natural selection before even going to the destination. But generally, yes, I think we do have to, and the time is absolutely right, step up as tour guides, as tour operators, to manage these kind of negative impacts. And I mean, obviously in all professionalism, we have to maintain our professionalism and say like, look, this is not okay because of that reason. If there's really no insight, we have to take measures. I think more extreme measures, because ultimately it's not about customers king anymore. They're a visitor of this country and they're a guest, and the host communities, they require more protection than the customers. And if we lose that and, you know, be the profit with it, then it's
I want to add a couple of points. Thank you, Vicky, for that question. One is, just like Matteo gave an example, the same way that you would supply people automatically with a reusable bottle, just have the scarves or have a solution that you would hand in order to avoid the situation. You can also try to increase the likelihood that people will remember to bring long trousers and long sleeve options by sending them a survey or a question about whether they will bring their own or they want you to supply. Because if you ask people to make a choice, then believe me, they'll want their own shirt rather than one that's used. The other trick is to put a price on it. Just present it as an option. Yes, we can make sure that we bring a long sleeve top immediately, but before that experience, please tick this box so we can add that to your package or something like that. And that will certainly make people mindful. But I also want to touch on something that Matteo said, and I think is really, really important. As we are finding people, and that's that sustainability, what is responsible and what is sustainable can vary across contexts. And this is where the fact that people think that they're becoming more savvy about what is sustainable is not helping. I'll give you an example. Matteo talked about the cultural differences even within one destination. I'll give you an example from the Nordics, where I do a lot of work, especially in the Arctic regions. Greenland, Faroe Islands, Iceland, the more northern regions. For example, the fact that people are now more conscious about choosing vegetarian options or more vegetables is simply not the more sustainable option, simply because all vegetables or most vegetables there are imported. So the fact that somebody comes in and they say, okay, I'm going to go with the low footprint vegetarian option or with a salad because this is the more sustainable option, in more southern destinations doesn't mean that that's the case there. So this is a very simple illustration of how the fact that people are becoming more sustainability savvy means that we have even more work to do to make sure that that knowledge is grounded in the local specifics.
Thank you very much for that, painted picture. I think that made that very clear. I would, for a moment, just officially close the event. I hope that most of you can stay with us for like maybe 1 or 2 questions. For the ones that have to leave on time, thank you so much for being here. We just quickly post again the link to the Grievance Mechanism study and to the survey, to the feedback survey. We would highly appreciate if you fill that out. As I said, I hope that most of you can stay with us for maybe like 1 or 2 more questions. I would be highly interested, and maybe that's a little bit of bold question, Milena, but we were talking a lot about like default options and minimizing unsustainable options. But I was just asking myself, if I, as a customer, want to go on a, let's say, very unsustainable trip with like the worst of the worst, just because that's what I think of a good holiday, and I want to do that, and I go, for example, on Matteo's website and I won't find that, would I not just go to another tour operator?
In some cases you would. So obviously many of these solutions are not going to move people from on the full spectrum of 0 to 100. But so in many cases, this is why we actually want to work with destinations on one side to set norms. You know that especially in the cruise industry, we are seeing an increasing number of destinations set limits. There's some great examples starting in Northern Europe. And of course, the hope is that this will spread, where the destination is simply saying, unless you abide by these rules, you're not going to be able to use our ports of call. So that's one of the ways. And we hope that this will change the norms in the industry as a whole. It's not going to happen from today to tomorrow. And the second layer of responsibilities for the companies. In many cases, companies can shift and change designs within the spectrum of what's possible. In some cases, understanding that some of the decisions that people go for are not mindful. They don't really want to go and do this simply because, you know, this is the only way that they imagine it. In many cases, many of the decisions are automated. So there's a good share of undesirable effects that are happening because people are mindlessly choosing what's easiest. So if we change the designs here and there, and we can change, let's say, from 0 to 20%, that's already good. Then we can worry about the next 20 and the next 20 and the next 20. So.
Yeah, I don't know, Matteo, if you would like to add anything. I think that also contributes what you said, right? And I actually found that quite encouraging that you said with the communication that you're doing, and even if people request something that is somehow not in line with your principles, that you most of the time make them stay with you just because you explain why you don't do it, right?
Well, yeah, as Milena said, it's a process really, and it's ultimately it's really to understand the social. It's a social feelings kind of thing, right? Obviously, you can give facts and whatever. You have to read the customer a bit. I'll give you an example, maybe just quickly, because I wasn't also sure about that. To be very honest, one of the greatest, very nice destinations in Indonesia is the Komodo National Park, where you can see these giant lizards. But they're already now suffering from over-tourism, and that looks like the Komodo lizard, because of that, is sort of decreasing in its habitat and threatening the species as such, right? And in the beginning, I thought, okay, what stand do I have to take here? And ultimately, I said, like, okay, look, I can give you a very good recommendation for a local tour provider that offers quality tours there. But from my side, sorry, I can't offer consciously that part of Indonesia because I think it's just tourism is not a solution for this particular destination. So I need to, for my sake, it's not for the traveler's sake. I need to, for me to be able to sleep at night, I would just say, okay, no, I'm not going to serve that destination. Ultimately, I guess it's all a compromise, the way you do it. I mean, you could also argue if they go with us, they travel with Let's Travel, their impacts are less than they would travel with another company. So you don't want to lose them as well. And in the end, we are still a business that needs to survive as well. So for a lot of these things, there need to be healthy compromises.
Sure. I mean, that's what we're always also working for, right? That we actually have this business case. I mean, in the end, a lot of decisions that we're taking and a lot of awareness that we're creating in the long run helps the destinations and also the company to become better, to have a closer relationship to their clients, to their suppliers, and that all of that in the end helps all of us to be more sustainable in economics and in social matters as well. As we already a little bit over time, I just once more looked at the chat. I saw a lot of comments. I think people have been very, very interested in this topic. I really hope that at one point we can deepen this discussion. I am incredibly thankful for all the insights that you shared with us today. And I want to sincerely thank you. I know it's always a lot of work, but this is exactly the platform that we want to provide and the insight that we want to give to companies. So yeah, sincerely thanks to you, Milena, and to you, Matteo. And thank you for being here and for finding ways in order to be a more socially responsible tour operator or tourism business. Last words from you, Matteo and Milena.
Thank you so much. For me, it's always a pleasure to be able to share some of these thoughts in hope that we can first demonstrate to companies that many of the changes we can make are not that difficult, but they can have a profound effect. And second, on the fact that we do need to apply human realism, and that this can help us in many situations. Those of you who are curious to stay in touch, don't be afraid to reach out in LinkedIn and connect. I'm more than happy to stay in touch and continue the communication.
Yes, also from my side, thank you very much for having me. You're doing a great job, and these conversations are necessary. They might be not all perfect, and you know, might not be the ultimate solutions, but we need to get the conversation going. And I appreciate it to everyone that was joining today. Also, thank you. I'll just give a very short message. Think about the concept of tourism once in a while, just on a broader concept. Like, look how we're behaving, how we do make decisions, like Milena said, but also what is tourism as a social economic phenomenon, and how can we impact it on multiple sides. Yeah.
Thank you very much for these closing words. All the information about Matteo and Milena, also their LinkedIn profiles, are on our website with all the information about the event. We will also post the recording there. I once more remind you of the Grievance Mechanisms study and the feedback survey. And yeah, nothing left to say. Thanks a lot, and see you again for our next webinar. Bye.
Bye-bye.